to come up, who will talk about data-driven solutions for responsible recruitment. So a lot of data discussions today, and we're very pleased to have them here. Thank you for being here. Go ahead. And just a reminder about the questions that they're taken via the dedicated platform or the live stream on IHRB's LinkedIn profile and our YouTube channel as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, good evening. For those who are joining online, my name is Ace de la Cruz. I'm from IOM. Thank you for joining us today in Kuala Lumpur and online. I have the easiest task today of just questioning speakers about what they're working on, but also a difficult one because it's the last session for today. So I hope that you bear with us in the next 45 minutes. But before I start questioning, let me also start with a simple reflection. Over the last decade, and we've also heard this in the room, that we've seen significant progress in our efforts to advance responsible recruitment, human rights due diligence, and addressing forced labor. We've seen, I think everyone in this room could attest that we've all invested our energies and resources into addressing these topics over the past years. However, one important question remains: are we moving in the right direction? Next year, we also expect a new global estimate on modern slavery and for forced labor. And many of us are probably going to be asking, are our collective actions translating into meaningful improvements for migrant workers? I don't know, but based on the previous estimates, we've seen that the numbers have gone up instead of going down. So this is what we're trying to also unpack today here in really understanding the centrality of migrant workers' lived experiences. And at the same time, many of our discussions today, but also in the ecosystem, have really just centered on recruitment fees or recruitment-related risks. Of course, I think they are essential, but for us in the International Organization for Migration, we recognize that migrant workers face a broader set of risks, not just recruitment, across the labor migration journey, starting from the pre-departure, recruitment, employment, return or onward migration. And this is also what we're trying to unpack in today's discussion. And I think the challenge is also not often the absence of data. I think we've also heard from our speakers that a lot of companies, organizations, research institutions are already investing into collecting quality data. I think the real issue is that data is fragmented, is often also disconnected from the worker realities, and also not really leveraged to inform decision-making processes of companies, of governments, and other stakeholders that we're working in. And we've also heard this morning that there is also the Global Data Partnership Against Forced Labor. So we also definitely are working with them closely to ensure complementarity of existing efforts. So without further ado, I would like to also introduce some of our speakers for today's session. We have Reiko Harima from the Mekong Migrant Network. Thank you for joining us. We also have Dr. Hélène Syed Zwick from IOM. And of course, we're also joined online by the Director of Human Rights and Social Impact in Amazon, Ms. Leanne DeWine. Thank you very much for joining us, Leanne, online. So my first question is directed to Reiko. So Reiko, you've been in the ecosystem for most of your life. You've seen it all. So because we also want to start with, if we're going to talk about human rights due diligence for migrant workers, we need to reflect, the realities that migrant workers face first. So based on your work on the ground with civil society organizations and migrant network associations, what are some of the most pressing issues or risks that are becoming more urgent today for migrant workers? So looking across the risks, starting from the pre-departure to employment to return or onward migration, where do you see the biggest blind spots or information gaps that continue to be overlooked?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me to speak. So as I was introduced, I'm a regional coordinator for the Mekong Migration Network, which is a sub-regional network of CSOs working to promote and protect rights of migrant workers. And so my context very much is migration within the region, particularly within Mekong sub-region, and also from Mekong region to outside Mekong, but within Asia. And also perspective is from CSO, working with migrants. And initially, the question that was phrased from ACE was, what is the emerging issue? And I did ask myself, what is the emerging issue? Because as I think many of us know, we have been working on these issues of migrants' rights for decades. And many issues are not necessarily emerging. They are not new. We know the issues are there. But I think probably the challenge we're facing is sort of certain level of normalization of labor rights violation. We do look into sort of severe rights violations and also the situation where migrant workers are in forced labor or trafficking situation. But what about millions of other migrant workers who face unpaid wages or underpaid wages, or the overtime working without proper pay, or not enrolled in social security, or working in very dangerous working condition without proper personal protective equipment? I think these issues are not very much focused anymore, because I think the many stakeholders, we all feel, okay, this already been said many times, heard over times, you know, it's been ongoing for decades. But does that mean the problem has been solved? I think not. So I would like to highlight that this issue need to be tackled very urgently, because not respecting labor laws and not respecting these rights means that rule of law is eroding. And if we can actually address these issues, we can help actually strengthen rule of law under which migrant workers, in which migrant workers are working. It would then also lead to less risk for forced labor, less risk for trafficking situation, and therefore I think it should lead to win-win situation.
Thanks so much, Reiko, and thanks for pointing out that the biggest risk is the normalization of labor rights violations, which are the same issues we've been confronting in the last 20 years, and probably are still the same issues that we're confronting today. So as a follow-up question to that, we all know that many organizations are already investing in responsible or ethical recruitment, and also HRDD, or human rights due diligence. So from your perspective, what are still what information or evidence are still missing, and how can we use this type of evidence or data to generate more informed action to protect migrant workers' rights across supply chains?
I think many of the speakers have also said in earlier sessions that the worker-centered information is very important. But when we say worker-centered information, I think we need to really look at details. Because if we look at the information from migrants purely from testimonial sort of sense, we may missing some very big picture where, for example, migrant workers are sharing what employer have told them to say. Often case, migrant workers are instructed by employers what to say, what not to say. If you don't follow that, they would lose their jobs. And of course, for them, the risk of losing a job is much more urgent issue than contributing, in a way, information to sort of broader discussion or discourse forum. So for them, they would follow. They have no other option, but would have to follow what the employer have told them to do. And I think what's making the sort of access to accurate information more difficult also is that the migrant workers are not allowed or encouraged to form organization of their own or trade unions, Because when we say we listen to migrant workers, but which migrant workers? There are millions of migrant workers. We cannot pick one or two, testimonial and pretend that represent all migrant workers' stories. So to actually facilitate this kind of a constructive dialogue to understand better the situation of migrant workers, to encourage or support migrant workers to form their own association union actually would be helpful for, I believe, in improving this business and human rights principle as well for business sectors.
Thanks very much, Reiko. So I heard the keywords representation, inclusion, not just in data collection efforts, but also in decision-making processes, in designing plans and efforts directly geared towards protecting migrant workers' rights. So now I'd like to turn to Leanne. Leanne, I see that you're still connected. You've been... Yes.
Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent.
Yes, so you've been in this ecosystem as well for a long time. You've been a staunch advocate of responsible recruitment and human rights due diligence within Amazon, but also within the broader business and human rights ecosystem. And I want to ask some of the business challenges that you constantly confront as a big brand. So I want to ask, what are some of the biggest challenges that companies like Amazon face today when trying to identify and address recruitment-related risks, but also other broader risks that migrant workers face across complex and multi-tiered supply chains? So I think it would also be great if you could just tell us where the biggest information gaps are and blind spots that make human rights due diligence difficult in practice.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy to be here today. I wish I could be with everyone in person, but thanks for letting me join remotely. And, I think this is a really important question. And I'm going to say something a little provocative, which is that I have been involved in this space for a very long time. And I think that the responsible recruitment movement has been operating on a theory of change that essentially, if enough influential buyers and brands adopt ethical standards, if we communicate them clearly to suppliers and we audit for compliance, that the market norms will shift and workers will be better protected. But I think the biggest challenge for brands right now in this space is that the data says this theory has failed us. We haven't failed for lack of standards or lack of effort. And in fact, as many of the brands in this room, I can't see you, but I have a feeling I know many of you who are sitting in the audience. We've been working on these issues for decades now. What we have seen is that, we can improve due diligence. We can improve the practices of our direct suppliers. We can absolutely do that. But the improvements have not rippled outward. And so what that means is that we're constantly playing whack-a-mole. We're constantly dealing with the same issues over and over again. Even if we improve them in one supplier, the next supplier has the same issues. And I think that's because the workers in the broader labor market, the ones employed by the non-compliant brands, the local manufacturers, the subcontractors that are sort of operating outside of any brand's audit perimeter, they aren't changing practices. As you just mentioned, the ILO estimates show that forced labor prevalence continues to rise, and the anecdotal evidence supports that we see every day. We do feel like we're playing whack-a-mole, solving only one issue to have three more pop up. And I think that's because the suppliers exist in a labor market populated by hundreds of other actors who don't share the same standards. And those actors are setting the floor. And when fewer of 10% of suppliers globally pay the full cost of ethical recruitment, and this is from a 2023 report by Verite, those 10% are not able to change the market. And so my point is that we've treated what is actually a market structure problem as a compliance problem. And instead, we need to focus on a science-backed model that is data-driven on how we actually solve these issues at scale. And as an anecdote, in medicine, we don't treat diseases by asking hospitals to voluntarily adopt best practices and then audit whether they did. We run trials. We measure outcomes against controls. We identify what actually changes the mortality rate. We build evidence bases, and then we fund the interventions that work and defund the ones that don't. And I think we need a similar approach in the responsible recruitment space. And what this comes down to is data, is cross-sectoral, cross-country data that's being shared and that is driving informed decision-making. And in fact, I think what the responsible recruitment field needs to organize around is not, has this company adopted the employer pays principle, but instead questions like, in labor corridors where the employer pays principle has been adopted by a critical mass of suppliers or employers, what happens to recruitment fee rates? What happens to worker indebtedness? And what happens to forced labor indicators over a series of years? And so I'm really excited about what potential lies in accessing metadata about this space and how that can change our interventions and drive interventions that are science-based and data-backed. And so to get there, I think we need coordinated data infrastructure across sectors. And that starts with recruitment-free data, but it also includes labor migration flows, wage outcomes, forced labor indicators. And as you mentioned, the data currently exists in silos. It's some with governments, some with NGOs, some in proprietary audit systems. And so until we can see a labor corridor as a whole system with all of these data points, it's really hard for us to identify interventions that change the system as a whole. And the second thing is, we really need a standard of evidence we need a higher standard of evidence. And so when we're assessing suppliers or companies, it's not necessary whether, I don't think it's as important whether a supplier or company has a no fee policy, but we need to have an evidence that shows us that given this intervention, specific fee rates dropped 40% after X intervention or Y intervention. That's the kind of evidence that needs to drive our actions moving forward. And the final thing is that we really need governments at the table. It's not a supporting role. Companies do not lack good intentions. Many have invested enormously. I know we have, and many other companies in the room today, but only government actors have the legal reach, the data collection authority, and the domestic legitimacy to set market-wide floors. And so I really see a need to bring together private sector, civil society, and governments, not only on data, but on collective intervention. And so this is the major challenge I see, is this siloed data and lack of data and science-driven interventions in the space. And that's where I'd really like to move us in this next phase of migrant worker protections in the sector.
Hello. Thank you very much, Leanne. I think that's very well put. So we need evidence-based and science-backed model, but also I think you pointed out on the need for having a more coordinated data infrastructure that looks at, the different types of data from a systems perspective and how we pull these data coming from different sources, from the government, civil society, workers, etc. Now, I think my next question, you've already touched some of them. So I guess, you're already covered in some respect, but I still want to ask you the question on some of the approaches that have been most valuable for Amazon in terms of leveraging or using worker-centered data, but also engagement and collaboration with external partners like IOM, because we've been working on several projects for so many years. And what lessons you think could benefit the wider responsible recruitment and HRDD community and every one of us in this room?
Absolutely. And I think the points on, worker-centered data are so well put, and that it can't just be anecdotal data from a few workers, but we need worker originating data at scale that really represents the actual lived experiences of, millions of workers, not just, 20 or 30 representative workers. So I thought that was such a good point. We are investing in a number of initiatives right now focused on just this. How do we get to a science-driven approach for making decisions about interventions that will help us improve not just the suppliers in our own supply chain, but the overall market? And so one thing that we're doing right now is we're investing in AI modeling at scale. And so at Amazon, we've been building AI-driven risk modeling that helps us understand a broad set of information, not just information from audits, not just open source information, but data that we've licensed from others, data that we've scraped from across the internet, historical audit data, all sorts of data to help us better understand the picture of risk at the individual supplier level, at the corridor level, at the industry level. And that's really helping us to better pinpoint our efforts at the most risky nodes within our supply chain. And the aim is simple. We want to shift human rights experts on our team off work that AI can do better and then aim them at the high judgment work that only humans can do. And so these AI models, I think, I'm really excited about what AI can help us do in this space in terms of finding trends and insights across large data sets. So what we're doing right now, the two main pieces of work in this space are supplier risk scoring. That's sort of our flagship AI model. It's training, 65,000 historical audits, and our model's now able to predict where we're going to have issues. We're also doing country sector risk modeling that replaces sort of static consultant-built snapshots with a dynamic data-driven risk score that can also then react to issues as they happen in the day, whether that's political, disaster issues, socioeconomic issues that are happening every day. Then now our model is able to react to that. But I'm super excited about, but the lesson learned here is the work needs more data, and that the modeling, which we are planning to share open source with others, we see this as a very pre-competitive space. We need to share data across sectors. The better and more data we have, the more accurate risk modeling can be. And that means collecting data at scale from workers, from their perspectives, data at scale from other companies and from governments. And I really think this is where our work with the IOM Data Hub and the Global Data Partnership on Forced Labor will come into play. And so that's my second point, is one of our other big investments has been our partnership with IOM on the IOM Data Hub. So we, since 2023, have had a global framework agreement with the IOM on protecting human and labor rights of migrant workers in global supply chains. But the core of this work is really the IOM Data Hub, which will be a data platform that maps labor migration processes across corridors, that will connect fragmented data sets and build a targeted base for intervention. And I really think IOM is uniquely positioned to host this kind of comprehensive data platform, just because of your trusted international status. And the IOM hub will also be a part of the broader global data partnership against forced labor, which is, as you've already heard earlier today, a partnership with the WEF, and will be an umbrella entity that consolidates multiple different types of complementary efforts and bringing lots of data together. And so I think, with the promise of AI risk modeling and the promise of data sharing across industries, this is where I'm most excited about improving the way that we intervene, improving the way that we react to risks of migrant laborers in our supply chain. I think to date, we've been building interventions based on past practice, industry best practice, but it will be drastically improved with this science-based and data-backed approach that we will get with data sharing across sectors.
Thank you very much, Leanne. And also, it's good that you brought up the topic on AI, because I think the work is not really to stop AI, but really to leverage AI to reap its benefits, functions for the common good. And I think you've also touched on the Migrant Worker Data Hub, which Hélène is about to present. So I think, Hélène, you have an easier time now explaining the data hub because Leanne just touched on it a little bit. But now I would like to turn to you. And also, again, thanks, Leanne, for sharing your perspectives on some of your interventions from Amazon. So now, Ellen, we've been in this journey since the beginning of the year, or probably you have been working on this topic for since last year. And could you tell us a bit more about this migrant worker data hub that IOM has been developing? What is its purpose? What is the context that we're operating in? And where are we now in setting up this data hub?
Thank you very much, Ace. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here to share some insights about the work that we have been doing at IOM in partnership with Amazon and other stakeholders as well. Throughout the day, the speakers have highlighted that very clearly. The challenge is not an absence of data systems. Clearly, this is not the challenge. The challenge is in the fact that these existing data systems, such as audits, supplier assessments, grievance mechanisms, internal scoring, risk models, these existing data systems do not reliably, systematically capture migrant workers' specific vulnerabilities along the migration journey. They were not designed to. They are static by definition. And actually, migrant workers move through various models, various actors, various jurisdictions before ever reaching the workplace. This is what we would like to address through the IOM Migrant Worker Impact Data Hub. I will call it the Data Hub. The idea of the Data Hub is clearly to collect better data, quality data, and produce shared intelligence in order to identify and address risks along the migration journey from pre-recruitment to recruitment, to deployment, employment, and potentially return in order to strengthen human rights due diligence. So the hub is designed as a standardized, open source, sector agnostic digital solution. We would like to rely on a methodology that we are currently developing that places migrant workers' experiences at the center. The idea is not to produce another compliance mechanism. And I very much appreciated the fact that during your presentation, you talked about a coordinating data infrastructure. And actually, this is the intention behind the Data Hub, to collect this better data and produce shared intelligence. This is a pre-competitive platform where brands and other stakeholders will contribute and benefit from shared insights. The idea behind this establishment of the Data Hub is also to co-create. I think one of the key features of our approach is co-creation. And throughout the last 2-3 months, we've been conducting a series of consultations with various stakeholders. It could be brands, it could be audit companies, and we asked them a series of questions about their data needs. 3 main gaps came up consistently. We talk about gaps, they can become opportunities. The first gap is the following. Current approaches are still compliance-driven. Even if there is an evolving risk that we can observe, if this risk is not part of the protocol, it will remain invisible. The hub will try to address this first gap. The second gap that has been identified through the different consultations that we have is data needs to be more forward-looking and actionable. So through the hub, we would like to generate early warning intelligence. We would like to flag, for instance, a new bilateral labor migration agreement. We would like to flag a surge in the number of recruitment agencies registered in a specific corridor. We would like to flag a change in recruitment practices. Again, we talk about intelligence. Finally, the last gap that was identified through the consultations and that we would like to address through the data hub is migrant worker voice is irreplaceable and consistently underused. We would like to develop the methodology based on combining a series of data collection tools, scoring models, and also specific indicators to voice migrants, not at the workplace only, but in communities, so that specific systemic risks, evolving risks, such as climate change that we described a bit in the previous session, could be identified and addressed. As the last part of your question was about where we are as of now, if I may talk about it. So the hub is currently in its design and pre-pilot phase. We work closely with Amazon. Amazon is serving as a co-creator, providing us with seed funding as well as technical engagement. Indeed, the intention is to scale up. We would like to have the proof of concept here in Thailand or there in Thailand and scale up rapidly. The roadmap is a 3-year roadmap, shows clearly our intentions in terms of going beyond a corridor, a sector, or a country.
Thanks so much, Helen, for comprehensively describing the purpose of the Data Hub and also where we are in the journey. And I want to emphasize that we're still in the design phase, and we're definitely interested to work with a lot of you here in this room for consultations or discussions related to use cases. But I'll talk about that later on. Maybe, Helen, if you've spoken a lot about data, but data could mean differently to different people. So could you just expand on what kind of data we're intending to leverage or collect within the framework of the Data Hub? And if you could also explain what kinds of insights or practical outputs this Data Hub and its accompanying methodology is intended to generate, and how these can support better decision making for different stakeholders. It's a mouthful.
Thank you, Ace. I think that data is a keyword. We use it extensively without defining it. And actually, data is only raw information, right? I really liked one of the previous discussions highlighting the fact that data alone doesn't drive changes, doesn't change outcomes. We need to analyze, process this raw information, the data being collected. And this is our responsibility at IOM, but also among all of us, to analyze the data that we collect. And what does it become? It becomes information, because we can make sense of the data collected. We would like, through the hub, to go a step further, not generating information, but generating intelligence, meaning that we incorporate into this information that we've been collecting our expertise, our experience, and we try to generate insights that are actionable, that can guide the decision-making process. And this is key. This is really what we are keen on through the Data Hub. So if I may quickly describe the IOM data landscape, we try to have usually an overall comprehensive picture. And we usually describe the data ecosystem through a 3-layer component. The first component is about the risk environment. We collect data to understand what's the landscape. We try to map specific vulnerabilities at a corridor level, at a sector level, and we also try to understand the regulatory framework. First layer. The second layer is about harm experienced by migrant workers. Again, the idea here is to have this migrant-centered approach, voicing them. We usually collect data for quantitative purposes, but we also complement this quantitative analysis with qualitative insight. Second layer. The third layer is about the institutional landscape. We try to understand, collect data on recruitment practices, on employer practices. And again, we complement this IOM data ecosystem with national statistics and other stakeholder statistics.
Thanks so much, Ellen. I see that we're also running out of time. We have 7 minutes left for this session. So I just want to pose perhaps a core question for all speakers, more of a call to action before we open the floor for Q&A if we have enough time. So you've already brought, like some of the issues, challenges, and interventions that you've been working on in your respective organizations or sectors. But my question is, if we want to move from fragmented efforts to more collective action to advance responsible recruitment, to protect migrant workers' rights, what can your sector contribute? And in addition, what support, resources, or collaboration do you need from others or these people in the room to make that contribution more effective and systemic? Perhaps I'll give the floor again to Reiko, and then Leanne, and then Ellen.
Thank you. So in terms of us CSOs collaborating, we're very happy to collaborate when we know this data will contribute in strengthening of labor rights protection and above all, enforcement of existing labor laws. Of course, it's good to develop new guidelines and everything, but we also have in this region good labor protection mechanism, labor laws, but they're not necessarily followed through. So I'm hoping that this data hub will help convince the government to strengthen the enforcement, and to do so, we're very happy to jointly advocate for that direction. I think the co-speaker from Amazon earlier mentioned that we do need the government commitment to improve the sectors, and did not mention in earlier sharing that many migrant workers and in very much invisible sort of work sectors, because they work in subcontracted sectors, which probably would not come up in the database for brands. But to reach out to the situation of these migrant workers at the bottom of supply chain, I think the overall improvement of the labor standard is needed. And to do that, the data hub will be helpful, and we are happy to work together for that.
Thank you very much, Reiko. And Leanne, the floor is yours. Hi, Leanne. Are you still there? Okay, while we're waiting for Leanne, maybe I'll turn to Ellen for now.
Thank you, Ace. So from IOM perspective, our contribution can be threefold. First of all, we bring the full migration system perspective. We cover the entire migration journey from recruitment to transit, to employment, to return. I believe that we are able to identify where risks emerge and how different parts of the system do interact. Our second contribution is related to our convening power. I think that we can convene partners and expect alignment when it comes to standards, when it comes to systems as well. Finally, IOM's contribution could be on the generation and translation of evidence into policy and practice. Earlier today, we heard a lot about the work that IOM has been doing, providing governments with capacity building, capacity development. I think that this is one of our strengths as well, to liaise with the government, to support them when driving change. When it comes to what we would need, I would have 2 points if time allows. The first point is indeed more better data and sharing this data through collaborative platforms. The second is potentially a stronger engagement and leadership from governments when it comes to building bilateral or regular pathways and building relationships between origin and destination countries.
Thank you very much, Hélène. And last but not least, Leanne, I see you're moving. So just to recap, if you haven't heard the question, so what could your sector contribute to this global movement, and what do you expect others from other sectors contribute in terms of resources and collaboration to make the impacts more systemic for migrant workers?
Absolutely. I think we, as I mentioned earlier, we are very excited to share our own data, but also I think particularly those of us in the tech sector are excited to share our tech expertise in building models, building approaches that can help us derive more actionable insights from data. I think it was a good point before that data, lots of data for data's sake is worthless. You need to have data that actually drives decision making, and so we need to work backward from the decisions and the choices that brands, that civil society, that governments need to take, and how we improve that decision making space. And so I think we are really excited to share the AI models we're building, to share our approaches to developing impact metrics, which I think is so critical here, and to share everything we're building internally with peers and with other sectors. What we need, I think, is what I also mentioned before, is we really need government engagement. We need governments at the table, not only sharing their own data, but using the data shared from different sectors to more aggressively enforce their own labor laws or adapt new approaches to enforcing their labor laws. I see this as absolutely requiring a multi-sectoral approach.
Thank you very much, Leanne. And I think that sums up the session for today. Unfortunately, we don't really have time for Q&A from the floor, but I hope that you're able to generate a lot of insights from this session. I also want to thank our speakers for being very open in today's session. Let's give them a round of applause, please. And we would like to thank also Amazon for their generosity in funding the first phase of the project. And we would also love to invite you for a reception that will take place after this event, which my colleague Carmen will be talking about. So thank you very much, and